Come on, we can do it. We can make it. Come on, to the cave. Let's go, let's go. Go, go. Oh, not even close. Hey guys, welcome to today's episode, and today is all about setting the stage for cutscenes. We have a bit of a monologue for this one because I want to talk through how I'm thinking about gameplay cutscenes in general. When I'm thinking about cutscenes in games, ideally we want it to be as seamless with gameplay as possible. So what do I mean by that? So when the gameplay actually stops, so when the player no longer has control over what's going on the screen, you want that change from gameplay over to cutscene to be basically one experience, like the exact set of circumstances that the player left the game at when the cutscene began. But then the question becomes, well, if that's the case, do we really need a cutscene at all? Like, can't we just do it directly in gameplay? And this may be unorthodox, but my philosophy with this is if you don't need a cutscene, just do it right in the game. Just make it one experience. Because really the difference between cutscene and regular gameplay is a game versus a movie. In both cases, the viewer is projecting themselves into the experience via their imagination. And although they can do that in both circumstances, the projection mode is slightly different. And what I mean by that is that the way you imagine yourself, the way you project yourself into a movie is different than the way you project yourself into a game. In the intro of this episode is an example of that. Like, I felt like in that moment that I could actually escape the tentacle, even though I can't. In a game, there's a sense of personal agency, like you have control over the situation. And in a movie, that's clearly not the case, and that expectation is set from the beginning of the movie. And so anytime you have to switch between those modes, you run the risk of the player getting ticked off because they lose that sense of agency. So that brings us to the real question, which is why use cutscenes at all in games? And as far as I can tell, there's only two reasons to do so. So if the regular gameplay experience just does not convey the sense of emotion, like the intensity of the experience that you want to convey at that moment, sure, use a cutscene. The classic one for me is the 1975 Jaws, the original dolly zoom. Now, maybe dolly zooms had happened before then, but it's like in that moment, you just zoom into Chief Brady and he knows exactly what's happening at that moment. And the intensity of the emotion is perfect. And then the second reason is that it's just not physically possible to make the scene at runtime. So an example of that might be a ridiculous explosion where you have tons of things that are blowing up, shattering into a million pieces. You could do it at runtime, but the frame rate will probably be like 1 or 2 FPS. Ultimately, for each of the moments in which you're considering using cutscenes for your games, it's about the player experience. Like, what do you want the player to feel at that moment? And personally, I want to make the player as much as possible feel like they are in the experience, not that they're watching, that they're in it. So anything that's detracting from that as a cutscene, not going to use as a cutscene. And what that means is that this episode is key because in this episode, we are going to build out the entirety of the Death at Sea experience directly into gameplay. And then it's only after the fact over the next 2 episodes that we'll decide what to use as cutscenes. And really, it's going to be up to you to decide that, how much of a cutscene we'll insert into the game, if any. So let's get to it. All right, so we're going to start today by creating the trigger mechanism for our tentacle, and we're going to do that on our character's animation blueprint. And the reason we're doing it on our character's animation blueprint is we already have the mechanism for determining whether or not our character is in the water, and we set that up back in episodes 20 and 21 of this series. Now, if you didn't follow along with this series, you could still follow along here, but you're going to need some other mechanism for determining whether or not your character is currently in the water. So we'll go into our ABP third-person character. The way I came up with to handle this is that we're going to have 2 Boolean variables, one for the left foot and one for the right foot. So at any given moment in time, when the player character takes a footstep, we're going to log that Boolean variable, whether or not that left foot or right foot is in the ocean. And then if it is in the ocean, that's going to increment a counter. And that counter is going to go up, up, up with every footstep or every jump into the ocean. And once we hit a certain threshold of that counter, Tentacle is going to come out and get them. So over here on the left-hand side of our animation blueprint, plus sign for variables, scroll down a little bit. First one is left foot in ocean, and that's going to be a Boolean. And the next one, you got it. So right foot in ocean. Both of those are Boolean, and then we're going to create a third variable. This is going to be our tentacle summon counter, and this is going to be an integer here. And if we zoom out on our event graph, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to close out of some of these functions just to simplify this. Back to our event graph here. And if we come up a little bit, so back in episode 20, we created atom notify left foot plant and atom notify right foot plant. So let's start with our left foot right up here. In this episode, because it's already very long, we're not going to have a mechanism for differentiating ocean water versus other water bodies. I think I'm just going to end up having 2 different physical materials and we'll do it that way, but we're going to do that in a future episode. But what I'm going to do is with our left foot plant. So if this footstep line trace by profile left is in water, meaning this is true, then it's going to do do this line here, and then all the way at the end, we're just going to take our left foot in ocean variable, and we're going to set that. We're going to set that to be true. Connect this up. So then what we're going to do is get our tentacle summon counter, and we're going to increment that by 5. And the way I'm thinking about this is once that summon counter hits 100, then boom, tentacle. So this is going to be connected up to tentacle summon counter again, but we're going to set it. So it's basically going to raise itself by 5 and connect it up here. So every footstep in the water, 5, 10, 15, etc., and up to 100. So compile and save this, and then copy all of this stuff. We're going to come down to our right foot. Just make sure you got your right foot plant and the top here, because the top line here, this is what's actually executed when the footstep is in water. So we'll connect up from here to here. And actually, we got to switch out left foot with right foot. Make sure you don't forget that. So connect up this to this, make sure it's checked, and connect up this. Compile and save again. But we also have to tell each foot if it's not in water that this should be set to false. So we copy and paste this here. Set it to false, that we're not in the ocean, and then connect that up. And then if we come up to the top, we're going to do the same thing here. Left foot in ocean, paste that down here, uncheck that, and connect this up here. Compile and save again. All right, so now we have a means by which those variables are being set, meaning those variables are going to indicate whether or not the character's in water. And now we have to figure out what those variables are actually going to do, like as that counter goes up. And we also need to consider, okay, if the character's just sitting in water, what do we want to have happen? Like, do we want the counter to go down? Do we want it to steadily go up? The way I'm thinking about it is if they're in water, it should steadily go up, but at a slower rate. The way I'm thinking about it is in terms of disturbing the water. So if they're just sitting there in the water, the creature will know that they're there, but it's not really disturbing the water, so it should go up at a slower rate. And then once they leave the water, then that counter should come back down. So to do all that, we're going to create a new function over here on the left, and it's going to be isInOceanCheck. And I'll move over a little bit to the right because this is going to do a sequence of things. So we'll do a sequence node. I've been using more and more of these sequence nodes lately, but I really like them. And the way this function is going to work is we're going to call it every quarter second or so. And when this function is called, it's going to check to see, okay, are we in water, and then increment the counter. And then if we're not in water, it'll decrement the counter. So first we're going to get our left foot in ocean boolean, get, and connect this up to a branch. And that's going to be the 0 here. I'll put in a little reroute. And then for the 1 here, we're going to get our right foot in ocean. And we're going to do the same kind of thing, connect up to a branch, connect up this here. And I'll move these 3 up, make a little bit more space, because then we're going to get our tentacle summon counter, get, move over to the right, because if we are in water, meaning this is true, then we're going to increment this, but a lesser rate. So what I'm going to do is just do a plus, and we're going to increment it by 3. And every time you're incrementing or decrementing, it's just a good idea to clamp something. So I'm going to clamp it between 0 and 200. And we should probably clamp it over on the event graph as well, but I didn't have any problem with it, so we're just going to keep it as is. And after this clamp, then we are going to set our tentacle summon counter. So set, connect this up here. So the true is going to be connected up here, and also this true right here. So actually what I'm going to do is reroute and then connect this up just like this one right there. Now for each of these, if they're false, meaning each foot is not in the ocean, what do we want to have happen? So in that case, I'm just going to decrement. I'm going to subtract by 2, and you could change this to whatever value you want, but I want it slowly coming down as they move out of the water, and then all the way down to 0. So that it doesn't go below 0, we're going to clamp it again, clamp between 0 and 200, and I'll move both of these down a little bit because then we are once again going to set the tentacle summon counter. But this one is going to be set to this, and if this is false, it's going to be set, well actually let's do a reroute, and we'll connect it up to there, and this one connected up to here, and yep, just like that. So basically every time this function is called, it's going to check both left foot and right foot. If the left foot is in the ocean but the right foot is out, it's going to add 3, subtract 2, so it'll have a net plus 1. And the last thing we're going to do in this function is we're going to add another pin to the sequence, and this is going to come down to a branch because the branch is going to check the ultimate check, whether or not our tentacle summon counter has reached the threshold that we set. So if this is greater than or equal to, and I'm going to say 100, but if you want the player to be able to stay in the water, or any character to be able to stay in the water for a longer duration, feel free to increase this and then connect this up to the branch. And we're not going to summon the tentacle yet. We're just going to test this. So we're going to do a print string first, and we're just going to say all caps tentacle summoned. And then the last thing we're going to do here is for the false branch. So if the tentacle is not summoned, we want to call this function again. So from the false, we're going to do a set timer by function name. We've done this a lot in this series. And we can right click on is in ocean check, rename just to get that name verbatim, paste it in here. And for the time, I'm going to randomize this a little bit because I want the tentacle summon to feel organic. I want it to feel unpredictable, like you don't quite know when and if it's going to happen. So the time here, I'm going to do a random float and range. And the range is going to be, let's do anywhere from 0.1 second to 1 second. And the last thing we're going to do here is on this chain of events, we're going to duplicate the print string, and I want to print out whatever our tentacle summon counter is currently. So we'll just connect this up here so we can print out the tentacle summon counter, and that's going to be temporary, but compile and save. And the very last thing, so we got this function, it's doing everything we need it to do, but we need to call this function to start because it's going to keep repeating because of the set timer by function name, but we got to get the party started. So let's go over to our event graph, and I'll scroll up here to event blueprint initialize animation, come over here to the right, and we'll call the is in ocean check just to start, just like that. Compile and save again. So we'll minimize this, and in our game world, one little thing, so let's cut our adversary AI character just for now, because if we don't take him out of the world, then it's going to print twice, 2 different characters. And then right click, play from here, wherever you want, close to the water. All right, so it's 39, and then we get out of the water, it's going back down, counter, and then back in. Yep, and tentacle summon, boom. So now we have to actually summon the tentacle. So the first thing is, in order to summon the tentacle, we need to be able to reference the tentacle. And the way we're going to do that is very similar to what we did in episode 60, where we got a reference to our ocean. Basically, we're going to get the single tentacle actor in the world. And we're going to do that on the blueprint function library that we started in episode 60. So we'll go back to our content drawer, into content, over to blueprint function libraries, and the level references that we started in episode 60, this one. And we'll create a new function. This is going to be titled get ocean tentacle. And we'll make this a pure function because we're just getting information. And all we're going to do is get actor of class. So get not all actors of class. We're just going to have one tentacle in the world. And actually, that's going to be a strategy thing, right? Because if the tentacle is already grabbing another character and killing some other character, then you can be in the ocean a little bit longer because you know the monster is preoccupied. So that's a deliberate choice on my part. If you want, you could have multiple tentacles, but then you got to get multiple references to multiple actors. So we're going to do get actor of class, and the actor class is going to be our BP underscore tentacle. And then we need to return this reference, right? So we got to do a return node, add return node. And with the return node, we're just going to make an output here. And I'm going to name the output ocean tentacle. And it's going to be our BP tentacle as a reference. BP tentacle, object reference. Connect this up here, just like that. And compile and save our blueprint function library. We're done with this. We can close out. So now let's open up our tentacle blueprint because we're going to start the function for actually activating our tentacle. So back to the content drawer, content, we put that under characters, tentacle, and the BP tentacle right here. And before we create any function for activating our tentacle, we need a target for our tentacle. So under variables here, we're going to create a new tentacle target. So + tentacle target. And that's going to be a character. It's only going to grab characters. You could do this for other things, but I'm not that ambitious, not yet. So character object reference. So I'll compile and save this, and then we can create a new function, and this is going to be activate tentacle. Activate tentacle function is going to have one input, and the input is going to be target to attempt to grab. And it's actually always going to grab, but you could also interrupt the tentacle and have it not grab, but that's going to be up to you if you want to do something more complicated. Character object reference. All right, so now we get to the complicated part of this. So when we activate the tentacle, the way I envision this working, let's say we have the center of our island here, and we have the character that's about to be grabbed here. So the tentacle should be in the ocean over here. So it should be in a straight line between the center of the island, the character, and then the tentacle. Because what we want to have happen is we want the tentacle to come out of the ocean, move into the character, and grab the character. But it should feel like it's always coming out of the ocean relative to that character's location. And that character's location should be relative to the shoreline or the rest of the land. If you have a larger landmass, this might be more complicated, but for me, I'm just going to get the center of the island, going to get the character's location, and extrapolate out that same distance where the tentacle should be in that same direction. So the first thing is this tentacle target, we are going to get the actor location. And this is where the character that we're going to grab is. And then we have to get the very center of our island. So what I'm going to do, minimize this, and whatever you want is the center. And to be honest, even if you have a giant landmass, you could get the center and this will work. You'll just need to shrink the distance between the tentacle and the character. And the way I'm going to get the very center is I'm just going to grab one of my gameplay ability pickup actors here. And so this right here is the very center. go over to the details panel, we can get that location here. So for me, it's roughly 4700 by 4700. So that's what we're going to stick with. So we'll go back to BP Tentacle and we're going to right click and we're going to say make vector. Make vector here. In the X and the Y, we're just going to make this 4700 by 4700. The Z, we're going to keep at 0. We're going to keep it at sea level. And what we're going to do is we're just going to subtract one from the other. And this is going to get us the distance between where our character is, where our target is, in that center of the island. But then we're going to take this distance and we're going to add it to our actor location, our target location. And that's going to then extend out the distance to where the tentacle should be. And then from this, what we need to do is we need to set our tentacle's location. So what I can do is get a reference to self, and then set actor location. This one right here. Connect this up here, connect this one there. And I'm also going to click teleport here. I'm not sure that's going to matter, but it's always good practice if you don't want triggering collisions along the way. But this alone is not going to do it, right? Because we need the tentacle to face in the appropriate direction because it's actually going to bend in that direction. So we also need to set its rotation. So to get the appropriate rotation, we're going to find look at rotation. Basically, we're going to find whatever rotation the tentacle needs to be set to in order to look at its target. So we're going to right click, get actor location. So this is going to be our current actor's location, the tentacle location. And then we have to get our target's location. So we can copy this one and we could take our target, connect this up here. I'll put in a reroute right down there. And from our tentacle location, we need to find the look at rotation and then connect this up here. And you probably don't even need this self up here, but I got it in my notes to have the self here and I don't have it here. So I think we're okay. Okay, so then once again, we're going to get a reference to self and we are going to set actor rotation, this one. Connect this up here. And we could just connect this up here to here, but that's not going to work because really what we need, if I go over to the tentacle, let's go back to our viewport. And specifically, let's go into the skeletal mesh here. And if I select group 1 here, it's this axis right here. It's the axis that's going to turn the tentacle to face in that appropriate direction. That's actually the Z axis. So if we go back to BP Tentacle and go back to activate tentacle. So we have to right click on new rotation here, split, right click on this one, split, and we have to connect up the Z to the Z. Everything else we're going to keep exactly the same, 0 and 0. So we're done for now with our tentacle setup here. This is going to move it to the appropriate location and then turn it to the appropriate rotation. So compile and save. And let's go back to our ABP third person character. Let's go back into the is in ocean check. And then down here with the tentacle summoned, let's actually call that function to move the tentacle to the right position. So what I'm going to do is right click, get ocean tentacle. And that's the function that we set up on our blueprint function library. And then from this, we can activate the tentacle, activate tentacle function here. And the reason we can do that is because it's getting a reference to BP tentacle. And we'll connect this up just like this, but we do need to plug in our character as the target we're going to attempt to grab. So under references, we can get a reference to our character and then connect this up. And that's going to determine the location of the tentacle that it gets moved to. So compile and save this, and we are ready to test again. We can close out of the skeleton here, keep the BP tentacle open. We're going to need to adjust that and get close to the ocean. Actually, let's go to a different part of the ocean away from the tentacle, because this is going to be the real test. Does the tentacle show up out in the ocean? Yeah, and there we go. It's been summoned, but it's not rotated in the right direction. So how do we fix that? So all we need to do to fix this, back in BP Tentacle, activate tentacle function, take our Z yaw, subtract 180 degrees. We just got to flip it around. Totally fine. And then connect this up. But before we do another test, there's one other thing I want to do, which is let's extend the distance out from the center of the island to where the tentacle is going to be. Let's double that distance. And the reason I got to double is because you don't know how long that tentacle stretches. So you'll see how far it stretches. It actually goes all the way to the middle of the island. So what I'm going to do to double it is all of this. I'm just going to move it out, and we'll take this and we're going to multiply it by 2. And that's just going to start our tentacle out quite a far distance into the ocean. And the Z, I'm going to just multiply it by 1. So compile and save this, and let's do one more test. Pick another side of the island, so any other side that doesn't have the tentacle. And there it goes. But the problem is it is not positioned exactly appropriately relative to where its target is, right? So let's talk about how to address that. So here's the thing, this is actually far more difficult than you might think, because we have to calculate where the base of the tentacle needs to be relative to its target that's quite far away. And not only that, the base location of the tentacle, it needs to move in real time relative to how its target's moving, because, well, a character's not just going to sit still while the tentacle's moving for it. But first things first. First, we need to figure out where the tentacle base needs to be when it's grabbing its target. And the way we're going to address that is almost identical to the idle animations that we set up last episode. It's really just a one-frame animation. So let's go back to our content drawer. Let's go into Tentacle Grab Anim Sequence 1. And we got to pause it at the exact moment where it's grabbing our character. So we're going to pause it right here. So right there where it's grabbing the character. And the best way I found of getting a relative distance between the base of our tentacle and where we want our character to be when it grabs is that we're going to save this as an animation. We're going to plug it into the blueprint and we'll get that relative distance. So we'll just come up to create asset, create animation from the current pose. And I'll title this just the Tentacle Grab 1 position. And okay, so we'll close out of that one, and then we'll do the same exact thing for Tentacle Grab 2 anim sequence to the exact position where we're grabbing the target. So right there. Create asset, create animation, current pose, Tentacle Grab 2 position. And then we'll close out of that. So back in BP Tentacle, I'm just going to select our tentacle mesh. And instead of use animation blueprint, we're going to switch this temporarily to use animation asset. And we'll select down here and then go to Tentacle Grab 1 position. So we'll move that over to our viewport. We're getting, well, got to adjust my camera, be 6. Somewhere way out here. So once you're to this point, what we're going to do is we're going to literally add a skeletal mesh asset. So add skeletal mesh. This is all temporary. And the skeletal mesh asset that we're going to add is our character. So I'm just going to search for mannequin. And we're going to get our SKM Manny simple here. And we're going to take Manny and we're going to move him to where he's going to be grabbed. Sorry, Manny, we've got to place you in the right position. Because our tentacle mesh, that's the root component. So we can get a relative offset by positioning Manny accordingly. And socket 65, it's right about here. But if you want to confirm that, if you want to be 100% certain, we could select tentacle mesh, go into here, navigate into the skeleton, joint 65 socket, move in really close, right about there. And you could literally count the number of section cups. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Right about 12. So back to BP Tentacle. Getting close and do the same thing. Shrink my camera speed down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, so he's got to be in a little bit. Not too far, in a little bit. And then we can get our transform right here. This is our relative location of the target character relative to the base of the tentacle. So once you got your character in a good position, you want the tentacle to be right about at chest level because it's actually going to pull his arms in, and you'll see that by the end of the episode. And so what that means is your location up here for this character is your relative location relative to the base of the tentacle. So that's negative 12,060, negative 660, 760. So write that down. You're going to need that relative location. And then I'm going to go back to the tentacle mesh and we're going to switch this to instead be Tentacle Grab 2 position. So this one right here. And we'll select our skeletal mesh and this position. I've done this ahead of time so I know what it is. Negative 12,000, negative 300, and 1320. And then just position your camera, make sure that seems like it's the right position. And if necessary, we can always come back, revisit this if something's not looking right, but looking good to me. All right, so now we can delete out our skeletal mesh. Won't need that anymore. Compile and save. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to spawn the tentacle under the water because you heard me say earlier, I want the tentacle to come up out of the water. And then over 2 seconds, as it's moving towards its target or as it's bending towards its target, I'm going to have the tentacle actually move into the appropriate position relative to that character. And that's going to be based on the offset of each location that we just went through. So if we go back to activate tentacle, so to start, what I want to do is want the tentacle to be further out in the ocean and then also below the surface of the sea, like well below. So I'm going to make this 3 and 3, so it's really far out. And then the other thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to zoom out, make some space here, move both of these over, zoom in, and we're going to subtract, and that's going to be connected up here. And what we're subtracting is Z 15,000, so well below the surface of the sea. I want that tentacle to come up out of the depths, not already be sticking out of the depths when it teleports. All right, the next thing is going to be moving the tentacle into the position that we want it to be in order to grab the character. And that's going to be done via a timeline. But before we do that, let's just move the tentacle into that position instantly because we'll be able to see, we'll be able to confirm, okay, that's the appropriate position. And so we'll come over here on the right hand side and I'm going to create a new variable here. It's going to be titled Tentacle Target Offset. Tentacle Target Offset. And we're going to change that over to a vector. So we're going to take this tentacle target offset and we're just going to set it for the first animation for now. We're just going to do the very first animation. So I'm going to get the value that I set earlier, negative 12,060. The Y is negative 660, Z 760. And then once we set this, we are going to set our actor location. And this is going to be the tentacle. And you're going to see how this works with the timeline, but this is the most complicated logic in this episode. So I ask you to bear with me. So from here, we're going to minus. And what we're subtracting is we're going to get our actor's location, get actor location, and that's our current tentacle location. And from here, we're going to do another minus, and just to comment on these as we go along, because this is going to make sense as we go along. So where the tentacle needs to be in order to grab its target. And this right here is where the tentacle is now. And so this is what's going to change over time with our timeline. We're just going to do it instantaneously right now. So we have to get actor transform. And from our actor transform, we have to transform our actor's location. Transform location. And the reason we have to do that is because of the offset, the tentacle target offset. We have to say, okay, wherever our actor is now, this is how much we're changing it by. And so we do that via the offset that we set here. And then this is going to be our starting point location. But then what we're subtracting from this is our tentacle target's location. So we're going to get actor location from our tentacle target, connect this up here. And we'll comment this as well. And we'll say where the tentacle's target is now. And then we'll comment this one as well. And this is going to be where the tentacle grab location is now. And then this minus sign right here. So this is the gap between tentacle and target. Honestly, this math was the hardest part of this. It took me a little while to figure this out. So hope this begins to make sense. And what's going to be changing with the timeline is this and also this. All right, so we are ready to test this, but there's one last thing we have to do, which is back in our tentacle mesh. We have to switch this from tentacle grab 2 position back to tentacle grab 1 position. And we need to do that because our tentacle target offset here, this is the animation 1 offset. Compile and save. And what we should see now is as soon as the tentacle gets summoned, it should be in that exact location to grab our character. Some people wait a lifetime for a moment. So it's close, right? It's a little bit too high. So this is where we need to adjust the offset right there. And so I'm going to go back into the blueprint, back into the tentacle target offset here. And we're going to change the tentacle target offset here from 760 up to 800. And let's do 840 and compile and save again. Test again. Yeah, so now we're talking pretty good. And so now we'll test with the second position. So if we go back to our tentacle mesh, change this to tentacle grab 2 position, and the tentacle target offset, I'm just going to switch this over to negative 12,000, negative 300, and 1320. Compile and save this. Same kind of thing. I think we just got to lower it a little bit, right? So I'm just going to move this up to, let's do 1400, and then compile and save. So now instead of instantly teleporting, now we're ready to move the tentacle into position. So back to the event graph, and we're going to do a new timeline on the event graph. So timeline, add timeline, and I'm going to title it tentacle movement attack forward. And we'll go into that. We'll add a new track, float track. We'll title this tentacle position relative to target. I'm going to create a couple keys here. So right click, add key. This one is going to be time 0, value 0. And then we'll zoom out all the way to 5 seconds. And that's going to be time 5 seconds, value 1. So time 5, value 1. And then right click on our first key, auto tangent. And actually we're going to make that move up just a little bit faster. Something like this, that should do it. You can also hit these buttons to normalize, basically take up the entire space. And that actually goes a little bit too far there, so we could just move it down. Yeah, that's better. So compile and save this, and then back to our activate tentacle function. And what I'm going to do here is we're going to take everything from here and these nodes as well, and this comment, and this as well. So all of this stuff, you want to take all of that, copy it, come back over to our event graph and paste it in right here. We're going to connect up update here to the set actor location, move this up, and we're going to take all of this stuff here, move it down a little bit, this one move in and over, and then our tentacle position relative to target. So this we're going to do a multiply I'm actually going to connect this up to the bottom, this up here, and then what we're multiplying by is this, the tentacle position relative to target. You can always multiply a vector by a float. These I'm going to move in a little bit and under. These I'll move in, and that means that this value here is going to increase up to 1 over 5 seconds, and that's going to be where the tentacle needs to be in order to grab its target. So compile and save this, and then back to activate tentacle. And what we're going to do, we can delete out all of this now, and we can keep our tentacle target offset. But now let's go back to our tentacle mesh. Let's switch this over to use animation blueprint, ABP tentacle. That looks good. And we can get a reference to that. So tentacle ABP reference is set the animation to play. If I could spell animation to play, set that, and that's going to be set to 2 because this is our offset for the second animation. Connect this up. And then once we set that animation to play, then we can get a reference to our tentacle movement attack forward timeline and say play from start and connect this up here. And that's going to call our timeline. So compile and save this. So this function is going to be called on ABP third person character when activate tentacle occurs. And then it's going to do all this. It's going to set our initial tentacle location, and then it's going to set our initial tentacle target offset, the animation to play. We're going to start with the second animation. We'll test out the first as well, and then we'll play the timeline from start. And that's going to trigger it on our event graph. It's going to set all this to where the tentacle needs to be in order to grab its target. And the last thing before we test this, and I just ran into this as a problem, we need to go back into our ABP tentacle and we need to set our default animation to play to 0 because otherwise it's just going to be looping with that animation 1 and then it's going to switch over to 2. It's going to do weird things. So let's compile and save this. So 0 is the default state, just sticking right up in the air. And then right click, play from here. So we should see the tentacle rising out of the water. Yep. Coming closer, zooming out, and then hooking. Yep. And that's where it should have picked up our character. But before we even do the pickup of the character, I'm noticing a couple of things. So the first thing is that the tentacle kind of zooms forward right there, kind of zooms forward in the water itself. Now, we're not going to get so advanced this episode that the tentacle is making ripples along the water. If you watch the Fluid Sim episode, you know the troubles I had with that. So we're not going to do that. So I want the tentacle to just move over the water when it comes down and grabs the character. And we have a very simple fix for this, which is the tentacle's initial rotation. We're just going to rotate it slightly backwards so that when it comes up, it's going to be outside of the water as it's moving towards the character. So the character is going to be able to see that it's getting closer. So we got to adjust both of the animations. And the way we're going to do that, let's go back into our content drawer. Let's open up the tentacle grab 1 anim sequence. This right here, we'll start with that one. And we'll move it to right before grab character. So right about there. And what I'm going to do is on the skeleton tree here, I'll just select joint 1 and we are going to key. And if you've never rekeyed an animation, it's basically the same thing as setting a key on a timeline because we're basically saying, okay, keep the rotation at this point, at this mark, at this moment in time. And we're doing that for joint 1 because right before we grab character, we want that to be at that exact rotation. But what I'm going to do now is back at the very first frame. So back here, we're going to set it to be a little bit tilted back. And that way it comes out of the water. So I'm just going to move it. Let's do 8 degrees. So 8.44 there and key again. So that's going to ensure that it moves out over the surface of the water versus going into the water. So we'll save this and then we'll go into our second animation, do the same exact thing, tentacle grab 2 anim sequence. So we'll pause it right before grab character, select joint 1, key, move it all the way back to the start, rotate it 8 degrees and key again. So now let's test this one more time. So it should be out of the water. Yeah, moving out of the water. And then zippity-doo-dah, that's where it would have scooped me up. So now, onto the scooping. But let's test our first animation first, just to make sure it works. So back to our blueprint, back to BP tentacle. And what we're going to do, back to activate tentacle, animation to play, change this over to 1, compile and save. One last test. I'm so excited to do the scooping. Let's just make sure it works. All right, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. Oh, you know what we forgot to do? The offset. So easy to forget that. So let's go back to our blueprint. The offset there is going to be 1260, negative 1260, negative 660, and 840. Compile and save. All right, here it comes. Right over the water, scoop. So we really have 2 parts to this left, right? Because obviously we have to grab our character. We have to do something following the grabbing. And then we have to withdraw the tentacle back into the depths. So we're going to do the grab character first. So back to our not BP tentacle, let's go into the ABP tentacle, and we'll go back to the event graph because we're going to use the grab character anim notify that we set up last episode. So the first thing is on event graph here, we have to try to get the pawn owner, and we have to cast to tentacle BP tentacle, connect this up here. And actually this is not the right thing to connect up because we need to do initialize animation, event blueprint initialize. We don't need to do that every single tick. That's what this does. And as BP tentacle, then we're going to promote to a variable. We've done this 100 times before. So we're going to rename our reference tentacle car reference. If I could spell with capitalization. So we'll delete this one out, and then we are going to have our grab character anim notify. And then from here we can get our tentacle target, get tentacle target, move this in up there. And from this I'm going to cast to BP third person character. And what this is going to allow us to do is do our character death function that we set up 2 episodes ago. Because what I want to do is I want to ragdoll the character as it's grabbed by the tentacle. And we're going to do character death. Now, if you're not following this series, this is not going to work. But 2 episodes ago, we did a character death episode where we ragdolled the character. And this is going to work for both our third-person character and our AI characters because they're all sharing the third-person character as a parent blueprint class. Then we need to attach the character, or actually the mesh of the character, to the tentacle. So from as BP third-person character, we need to get the mesh, get mesh. And then from here, we need to attach component to component. Component to component, right? Just like that. Attach this up, and the parent is going to be, if we get our tentacle character reference, we can get our tentacle mesh, get tentacle mesh, and connect this up here. And then the socket we're attaching to, this is going to be the joint 65 socket. In the location rule here, we're going to snap to target. Now we're positioning the character as close as we could to where it's actually grabbing, such that the snapping seems completely natural. In the rotation rule, I'm going to set this to keep world because that's going to make it feel more natural that the position of the character is going to be the same position where the tentacle actually grabbed him. And the scale rule. So this one's interesting because initially I set this to snap to target. And because the tentacle was scaled 2.7 times size, it actually instantly scaled the character up to 2.7 times size. But the thing about that is that I didn't even notice that until I did this like 10 times. And the reason I didn't notice is because it looked good. It looked natural. Like I saw the full character getting grabbed. I really liked the effect. And so actually, just from an effect standpoint, I think I'm going to say snap to target. But it's really up to you here. You could keep world, and that will then keep the realistic size of the character as it's grabbed by the tentacle. So we'll compile and save this, but actually it's not going to work. And let me show you why, but let's first simulate, see how it goes. So here comes the tentacle. It should kill our character. Our character dies, rolls up in a ball. Poor guy, but it's not working. So why is it not working? So we have to go back into our third person character blueprint. So content core into BP third person character. The culprit, the reason it's not working is because we are fully simulating physics on the event graph here when we set all bodies to simulate physics. And whenever you do that, the attachment just straight up not going to work. So here's what I came up with. We are going to duplicate the character death function that we created 2 episodes ago. And we're going to call this the character death ocean. It's going to do almost the same exact things, just slightly differently. We're not going to do full physics simulation. We're just going to simulate most parts of the body. So if we expand under health here, character death, we can right click and say duplicate. I'm going to call it character death ocean. And if we come down here to the right, so the only thing we're really changing here is this ragdoll death. So I'm just going to make some space. We're going to delete out ragdoll death. And instead, what we're going to do is get a reference to our mesh. And we are going to say set all bodies below, simulate physics, set all bodies below this one, connect this up here. In bone name, we'll drag out make literal name, and we're just going to specify a few bones to simulate, everything beyond those bones. The first one is going to be spine _ 04, so this is going to take care of our upper body, so everything above our neck and head, but also our arms are going to be flailing around. I'm going to do a new simulate checked, not going to include self. So we'll take all these, copy them over here, and then connect this up. And the next one's going to be thigh _ L, left thigh. And then we'll select all those, paste them, and we're going to do the right thigh, thigh R. And then move over here, connect this up here. The one other thing that I did to have the best effect, in my opinion, just my opinion, but I no longer attached the camera boom to the mesh. And that way the camera boom, the camera just stayed exactly where it is. So it watched the character being pulled away by the tentacle. And if it follows the character, I feel like you don't get the same effect. So I'm going to disconnect this. We're going to move this one up, connect this one over here. I I can just delete this one out and move these in a little bit. Compile and save our third person character, and then back on ABP Tentacle, you can just switch out this function. So instead of character depth, get character depth ocean. Connect this up, compile and save. We are ready to test this out, truly. All right, here we go. Moment of truth. And our character pulled in. You see it was raised a little bit high up, right? And it's because of that scale. So what we can do to fix that is we can just change the position of the socket slightly. So if we go back into our skeleton of the tentacle and then back to joint 65 socket, zoom in, and really this is only going to be necessary if you scale up the character to 2.7 times size like I'm doing. So you can move this down slightly just like that and save that. And in addition to slightly changing the location of the socket, the one thing I found to make a difference in terms of the quality of the grabbing was this location rule here. By setting this to keep world, just had a nicer effect. So let me show you what I mean. So if we simulate, so there it comes up. Yeah, so there we go. Keeps that position. And it even looks like the tentacle hits him on the head to kill him, doesn't it? Love it, Ricardo. So now what we're going to do is we're going to have the first animation be used if the character is above sea level, and then we'll have a second animation, the second animation be used if the character is under the sea. But it's entirely up to you. You can make it entirely random. Both animations will work because we have the offsets for each. So we're going to go back into our BP tentacle here, and I'm going to zoom out a little bit. We're going to make some space here. We're going to get a reference to our tentacle target, and we're going to check to see from our tentacle target, we can get actor location and split this, split struck pin. Actually, I'm going to change the order of these because we need to put this here. So if the Z is above a certain threshold, then we're above sea level. So for me, that threshold's 0. So we'll branch here, connect this up. So if the Z is above 0, then it's going to do the first animation, this one right here. So true set to this. And if it's below that threshold, then what we can do is copy and paste these. Animation to play is going to be 2. This is going to be connected up here. And the other offset, it's going to be negative 12,000, negative 300, and 1440. Connect this up just like this. And similar to the sockets, I found that in order to get the best effect, I needed to play with this offset just a little bit for the second animation. So I ended up with negative 11,960, negative 300 was exactly the same, 1310. Let me show you what this does. So you want your head slightly above sea level so you could watch it. Yeah, if it's going up in the air like that, then you know it's the underwater animation. Scoops him up, and there we go. So now we got to set up the proper withdrawal of the tentacle after the grab. Now it's going to fade to black, but it's not going to fade to black if it's grabbing an AI character, right? So we still need the tentacle to go back under the sea. So what we're going to do is if we go back to BP tentacle, we're going to create a new variable. This is also going to be a vector. We're going to title it tentacle location at activation. So when the tentacle is activated, it's going to save its location when it's activated such that it can return back to that location. And so I'm just going to create some space in the activate tentacle function right here, move this out, and we are going to set it right about there, connect this up here, connect this here, and all we're going to do is right click get actor location and connect that up right there. Compile and save this. And then over on our event graph, what we're going to do is do a new timeline right below this one. Add timeline. This is going to be titled tentacle movement withdrawal backward. And if we go into that, we're going to do another float track, add float track, title it tentacle withdrawal. And we'll right click on 0, add key to curve float 1 times 0, value 0. And then over at 5 seconds, this is going to be very, very small. So right click, add key to float. This key we're going to make 0.003. So 2 zeros, 3. Tiny number. And then back on the event graph, so I'm going to get our tentacle location at activation, get, and we are going to subtract 10,000. The reason I'm subtracting 10,000 is we're just going to make sure the tentacle is not sticking up out of the ocean by the end. And then we're going to multiply this by our tentacle withdrawal here. So this, connect up here, this one to here. And then we're going to get actor location because that's where we're starting from. And this is what's going to be added to our actor's location. So we'll do a plus, connect this up here. And then from here, we will set actor location. This one right here. Connect up update to there. And once again, select teleport. I'm going to move all these in. This one as well. So if you got all that, if you're subtracting 10,000 from here, compile and save. And then if we go back to ABP Tentacle, so last episode, if we go into our Tentacle grab 1 or 2 anim sequences, we created 2 different events here, right? We have our fade out and the grab character. So the fade out, this is what's going to actually call that tentacle withdrawal. So back to ABP Tentacle. So we're going to right click anim notify fade out. So we could just search for fade out. We're going to get our tentacle character reference, and then we can get a reference to that timeline that we just created. So tentacle movement, withdrawal backward. And then from here, play from start. Connect up this to this. And then the other thing I'm going to do here is we are going to set our animation back to 0. So this animation to play, we could set that back to straight up in the air. Compile and save. And although this is being set instantaneously, if we go back to our grabbing state machine, remember that in order to go back here, so these nodes, we set the duration to 2 seconds. So it's going to slowly go back up to a vertical position. All right, so before we test, let's take the tentacle that we have in the world by default above the water. Let's move that under the water just so it's not sticking up at random there. And then we're going to do an interesting test for this one. So right click near your air ability pickup and play from here. And we'll pick up our air ability. And I just want you to see what this looks like. So you're going to activate the tentacle. As soon as you activate, turn on the air ability, run out of the water as fast as you can, like this. Yep. It still picks up the character. Yep, whole thing. But let's also test now with our AI character. So now what we can do is we can simulate just with the AI. So back to core, back to AI, adversary AI character. I'm just going to place him right about there. Just simulate. We don't even need to play. We could just watch how it works. Oh, he's trying to get out of the water. Let's see if it triggers. Yep, got him. Here we go. Swoop. And he becomes 2.7 times size and gets pulled under the water. Yep, so that's your tentacle pulling under the water right there. And actually, the tentacle's still sticking up barely out of the water. So what I'm going to do, back to our BP tentacle. So we could switch this to 12,000 instead of 10. Compile and save again. And let's also test with our under the water animation. So let's get our adversary AI character. We'll put him a little bit further under the water. Play. He's trying to get out of the water. He's trying really hard, but I don't know. But the other thing we notice here is that jumping is not adequately triggering the tentacle, right? So the counter is going up slightly because he's still in the water, but the jumping's just not disturbing the water. So let's fix that. So to fix that, we're going to navigate over to our ABP third person character again and back to the event graph. So let's zoom out on the event graph. We have to come to what I consider my worst blueprint logic of this entire series, and I have to apologize for this. This was back in episodes 20 and 21. So it's up at the top of our event graph of our animation blueprint, update animation. It's this right here, the jump, land, sound, and effects. Let's go into that. Yeah, this right here. Ugh. So what we got to do is in this top string, so right after the jump, land, splash sound. So right here. So if it's playing a jump, land, splash sound, then we know that we're in the water. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some space here, move out all of these nodes slightly, and we're just going to increment our counter. So we're going to get our tentacle summon counter. So right here, get, and we're going to actually add 10. Because if we're jumping in the water, I figure we're disturbing the water more than a footstep, right? So then we can set our tentacle summon counter right there. Connect this up here, connect this up here, this one there. Compile and save our animation blueprint. But there's one other place in this giant macro that we need to set this. So this right here and this, I'm going to copy those 3 nodes. If we come back over to the left, the underwater check. So if we are underwater, I still want to set it because if we're underwater, we're disturbing the water every time we jump. Same kind of thing. So I'm just going to move these over here. And actually for the underwater, this is going to get called every single tick. And the underwater check, don't want it increasing by 10 with every single tick because that's going to be a lot. So let's do it with 1. That's still going to increment very quickly if we're under the water. Compile and save. And the one other thing I found when testing this, and this is not directly related, but I think we need to fix this, is that we don't do our underwater line traces that far down. So if we're really under the water, it's not slowing down our character. And it's also not registering that we're under the water. So if we go back into underwater check here, I'm just going to move this up instead of 150, 2000. And we also need to do the same thing with footsteps. Footstep line trace by profile left. I'm going to set this to be 2000 and footstep line trace by profile right. We're also going to do this to 2000. And that's going to ensure that, yep, unless we're really far under the ocean, which my ocean floor is not that far, it's always going to trigger. Compile and save. So let's test this again. I'm going to delete out our adversary AI character, and actually I'm just going to play under the sea. So play from here, and yep, we're instantly stopped because we're under the water. It tentacle summons very quickly. It goes up above the water and then comes down, boom, scoops me up. So that's looking good. Pulls me down into the depths. We just got some artifacting of our water there, but hope we'll fix that when water's no longer experimental, all the way out in 2028. But there's one more fix I want to do, and that's related to our air ability here, because you'll notice that even when we're in air, the summon counter continues. Now, it makes some pretty wild effects, because we could be all the way in air and it still grabs us. But that's not realistic, right? If we're out of the ocean, we want that counter to start coming back down. So let's fix it. So for that, if we go back to our ABP third-person character, the is-in-ocean-check function, so this that we created this episode. So what I'm going to do is select all this stuff. We're going to move it down slightly. I'm actually going to disconnect this, this, and this, because we're going to add another pin. This is going to be hooked up here, this down here, and then 3 down here. The very first pin is just going to check to see, are we falling? So under essential movement data, we have this is falling Boolean, get. And then we can check with a branch, are we falling? This right here, just like that. Because if we're using that air ability, this is automatically going to be set to true, that we're in the air. And in that case, what I'm going to do, very simple, I'm just going to set our left foot in ocean, set that to be false, because if we're in the air, we're not in the ocean. And then we're going to do the same thing with our right foot. So set that also to false. Compile and save this. So we can close out a number of these things. Well, I'm going to keep these 4 open. We're going to do some cleanup, play from here. All right, our air ability is active, and I float out of the water. Yep, and it's decrementing again because we is falling. Are is falling. That is proper English there. But let's see if I summon the tentacle and try to get away. Okay, let's go, let's go, let's go. Come on, come on, come on. Yeah. Ugh. But the one thing you'll notice there is that our character's physics is a little bit outrageous. Like the character kind of rolled up in a ball for a moment as the tentacle hit it, and then it seemed to grab it again. So let's fix that too. So if we open up our BP third-person character, back in our character death ocean function, the best way I found to fix that is this set all bodies below simulate physics. So we're going to make this a little bit less intense because right now it's fully simulated. So we can get a reference to our mesh, and then from here we could set all bodies below physics blend weight. So this one right here, and connect this up. And what we're going to do is we're just going to copy these same values. Connect this just like this, don't include the self, and we're going to set the blend weight to be 0.5, so roughly half simulated, and then paste that 2 more times. This one is going to be our thigh L, copy it again, and it's going to be thigh R. You ever go to a chicken place and just order a right thigh and not a left thigh? Don't do that, by the way. Compile and save. So we'll try this one more time. Tentacle summoned, catch me if you can. Yep, he did get me, but we noticed some weird behavior there, right? We noticed that the character actually did a flip, like kind of a somersault, and it took me a little while to figure out what was going on here, but what's going on is that our character is actually going into a fall animation because the velocity of the character is changing so abruptly. So let's fix that. So we did the fall animations for our character back in episode 41. So I'm going to navigate over to our ABP third-person character blueprint. And if we navigate over to our state machine, so in the anim graph, if we go to our main states, so this is what's happening here. It's going from to land to either hard landing roll or hard landing straight down, and then it's doing a fall animation. So what I found works easiest to fix this is we can create a new Boolean variable on our animation blueprint, and we'll call this one dead. We could do it by referencing the third-person character tags, but I think it's easier to just create the Boolean variable on here, and then for each of these we could say, okay, only take those animation paths if each of these character is not equal to dead. So over here on the left, we're just going to come down and do a new variable, plus sign there, dead, question mark, and that's a Boolean. And what I'm going to do is take these 3, move them down slightly, and then we're going to do from to land directly back to locomotion if our character is dead. So actually this one I'll move up just so it's not overlapping there. So this state transition rule will go into that, and we're just going to say dead. If our character is dead, it's going to take that path. Compile and save that. Back to main states, and now we have to go into each of these other 3 transitions here. So this first one, we just have to add another criteria, plus sign, and say not equal to dead. So get dead, and just say not Boolean, connect this up. And I'll copy both of these back to main states into our second one. Same kind of thing, add a plus sign, paste them there, connect this up. Copy them again, go back to main states, last one. So over here, another plus sign, and paste it down here. Connect this up. And I'll just move these over so there's not much overlap. And we'll put dead over here. Compile and save this. So the last thing we have to do is we have to actually set our dead variable when our character is dead. So back to BP third person character in the character death ocean, and we're also going to set this on character death that we set up 2 episodes ago. So I'm going to scroll out a little bit. We're going to come over to our add unique here. I'm just going to make a little bit of space between that and all of these. Under references, get a reference to our animation blueprint, and we are going to set dead. And yes, our character is unfortunately deceased. Copy this. We'll go over to our character death function, and we'll do the same exact thing. So move this over and paste this in right here. For this one, it's not really going to matter for animations because we're fully ragdolling the character, but just in case in the future, if we ever want to have an animation, then we have a way of doing that. So compile and save our third person character. And we are ready, perhaps, for a final test. All right, I'm going to do my darndest to escape the tentacle this time. Here we go. Yep, and our character is partially ragdolled, but only partially. Pulls into the depths. There's one last very minor fix I want to go over, and that is if you leap way out into the ocean, like way out into the depths. And so if I jump out of the depths, so the tentacle's been summoned, but where does it grab? Well, it does grab me, but look at my body relative to the tentacle. So what's causing that is our second animation is a little bit slower than the first. In the 5-second lead up time, that's part of our timeline that we set up, it's just not quite enough time. So we got to extend that out to 7 seconds, really quick fix. So we'll go back into our BP tentacle, back to the event graph, and it's this tentacle movement attack forward here. We need to go into this timeline and extend this out to, let's do 7 seconds. And what that's going to do is it's going to continually adjust the location of the tentacle a little bit further. So compile and save this and test it one last time. Show me the way to go home. Boom, boom. I'm tired and I want to go to bed. I had a little drink about an hour ago and the tentacle went straight to my head. Let's see if it gets me. Yep, just fine. And pulls me into the deep. So just as we do at the end of every episode, guys, just a little bit of cleanup for this one. So back to ABP third person character, we created several new variables here. We're going to take our left foot in ocean, right foot in ocean, and our tentacle summon counter, and we're going to give all of those a category of ocean. So this one, ocean, right foot in ocean, also category of ocean, tentacle summon counter, same thing, ocean. Compile and save this, and the last thing here is an ocean check. We're also going to give it category of ocean. And one other thing, since we're here, the sliding footstep sound, this should be under footstep, and I never categorized that, so let's put it under footstep. Compile and save. So that concludes our episode for today, and next episode, it's the final piece of this, facial expressions and other character animations before we actually do the cutscene. So I hope to see you there.